She tore the cleaning lady's uniform in front of everyone, thinking no one would do anything. But a millionaire watched it all in silence, until he decided to shout and change the course of history. What seemed like just another humiliation turned into a scandal impossible to hide. If this beautiful story of overcoming and love interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching us from. Continuing, the city of New York woke up that Thursday like any other winter day. Gray skies, heavy traffic, and millions of people rushing through the avenues in search of survival, purpose, or simply their next appointment. In the neighborhood of the Upper East Side, however, the pace was different. There, the tree-lined streets hid silent mansions, high gates, and a life that seemed to happen far from common problems. It was there that the residence of the Sterling family was located, one of the most respected surnames in New York business circles. Maya woke up at 4:30 in the morning, as she did every day. The alarm didn't even go off. Her body was already used to that routine that began before the sun and ended long after night fell over the city. She got up slowly, trying not to make noise so as not to wake her mother, who slept in the room next door in their small rented apartment in Queens. She took a quick shower, prepared coffee, and put the clean uniform she had ironed the night before into her backpack. Before leaving, she still left a lunchbox ready for her mother, who worked as a seamstress and also knew no rest. Maya was 32 years old, but she carried on her shoulders the weight of someone who had lived twice as long. Since she was 15, when her father became unable to work after a serious health problem, she took on the responsibility of helping at home. She dropped out of high school in her sophomore year and started doing cleaning jobs, housekeeping, and any work that appeared. She promised herself that one day she would go back to school, that she would finish her studies, that she would go to college. But the years passed. The bills didn't stop coming, and the dreams were pushed to a later that never arrived. Still, Maya was not a defeated woman. On the contrary, she had a spark in her eyes that the hardness of life could not erase. She read whenever she could, watched documentaries, and learned new things through the internet when she had time left. She knew she was intelligent, capable, and full of ideas. She also knew that the world didn't give many chances to people like her. But she continued to keep deep in her heart the certainty that she deserved more, that one day things could change. She took 2 trains to get to the Upper East Side. The commute took almost 2 hours. During the way, she observed the city slowly transform. The crowded outer boroughs gave way to elegant neighborhoods, tired faces were replaced by imported cars, and the urban landscape gained green, space, and silence. Maya knew that contrast well. She had worked at the Sterling house for 3.5 years. She was responsible for the heavy cleaning, the organization of the rooms, and ensuring that everything was always impeccable. She did her work with dedication, attention to detail, and a discretion she had learned to cultivate as emotional armor. The house was immense. 3 floors, a pool, an extensive garden, imported furniture, and works of art scattered across the walls. Edward Sterling, the owner of all that, was a successful businessman. At 45, he commanded a holding company that operated in various sectors: technology, real estate, and investments. Heir to a fortune built by his grandfather, Edward had always lived surrounded by privilege. He studied at the best schools, traveled the world, married a woman from high society, and built an empire even larger than the one he received. He was respected in the business world, feared by competitors, and admired by many. Maya crossed paths with him rarely. Edward spent most of his time in the office, in meetings or traveling. When he was at home, he locked himself in his home office or received important visitors. He was polite to the employees but distant. He wasn't the type to talk, ask names, or show interest. He simply existed in another universe, parallel to hers. And Maya preferred it that way. Invisibility was safety. Victoria, on the other hand, was a constant and annoying presence. Edward's wife was 42 years old, with a body maintained by a personal trainer and nutritionist, hair always impeccable, designer clothes, and a posture that made it clear she considered herself superior to everyone around her. She came from a traditional New York family, studied at private Catholic schools, and went to college for international relations, but never worked. She married Edward at 24, and since then she dedicated herself to being the perfect wife, organizing charity events, attending exclusive clubs, participating in the boards of cultural institutions, and obsessively taking care of the couple's public image. Victoria treated the employees like pieces of furniture. She didn't greet them, didn't look them in the eye, and referred to them in the third person even when they were in the same room. Maya had already witnessed embarrassing scenes. The cook being reprimanded with screams for preparing a sauce that was slightly different from usual, the gardener being humiliated because a dry leaf fell into the pool, the housekeeper being fired without notice because Victoria simply decided she didn't like her vibe anymore. No one lasted long in that house. Maya was the exception because she had learned the art of being efficient without drawing attention, of anticipating problems, and of never, ever questioning or talking back. That Thursday, however, the routine would be different. The house had been in an uproar since Monday. Victoria had decided to organize a luxurious reception to impress a group of international investors Edward was courting for $1 billion project. It would be on Friday night, but the preparations had already transformed the residence into a silent construction site. Decorators, florists, catering staff, security and sound and light technicians. Everyone was circulating under the tyrannical command of Victoria, who inspected every detail with the eyes of a predator. Maya received clear orders. On Friday, she should arrive at 5 in the morning to do a complete cleaning before the assembly team started working. During the event, she would remain on standby in a discreet service area, ready to resolve any unforeseen event without being seen. After the party, when everyone left, she would return to clean everything and leave the house exactly as it was before. It would be a whole day of work, maybe more. Victoria didn't mention extra payment. She only made it clear that it was expected of her, as of any employee, to be at their disposal. Maya accepted without complaining. She needed the job. She needed the money. Her mother's blood pressure was out of control, and the medicines were expensive. There was no room for pride or contestation, but while she cleaned the living room's marble floor that morning, she felt a tightness in her chest. Tiredness, perhaps, or the feeling that she was trapped in a wheel that turned without stopping, always taking her to the same place. Work, tiredness, bills, work again. Meanwhile, Edward was in his office in Midtown, closing the final details of the negotiation that would bring the investors to New York. The meeting was crucial. If it worked out, his company would double in size in 5 years. It would be the crowning of a brilliant career. But while reviewing spreadsheets and contracts, Edward felt a strange emptiness. It wasn't unhappiness. It wasn't regret. It was just a feeling that all of that, all those numbers, those meetings, that success, didn't mean as much as it should. He had been married to Victoria for 18 years, with no children. In the beginning, they were happy, or at least Edward thought they were. Victoria was beautiful, elegant, knew how to move in the right circles and said the right things. But over time, Edward began to realize he didn't really know her. He didn't know what she thought, what she felt, or what she wanted beyond maintaining appearances. The conversations were superficial. Sex was mechanical. Their coexistence was protocol. They lived like partners in a company called marriage, each fulfilling their part of the agreement. Edward never had the courage to question it. He preferred the comfort zone. Work, travel, projects. Life worked that way. He offered the financial structure and the surname. Victoria offered the impeccable image and the network of relationships. Questioning shook structures, and Edward didn't like conflict, but lately he had been noticing things that bothered him. The way Victoria treated the employees, for example. The shouting, the humiliations, the contempt. Edward always pretended not to see. After all, it wasn't his business how his wife managed the house. But the scenes were beginning to accumulate in his memory and cause growing discomfort. He remembered the cook crying in the garden after being insulted. He remembered the old driver who resigned after months of hostile treatment. He remembered Maya, the quiet cleaning lady who always looked away when she crossed paths with someone in the family. Edward sometimes wondered if Maya had dreams, plans, a life beyond that job. But he never asked. He never approached her. He just observed from afar in silence, like someone watching a movie without participating in the story. On Friday morning, when Maya arrived at the still dark house, she felt something different in the air. Maybe it was nervousness, maybe a premonition. She began to work in silence, cleaning every room with the same dedication as always. Victoria appeared around 7, already with makeup and dressed, inspecting everything with a critical eye. She didn't greet Maya. She just pointed out imaginary flaws, demanded they be corrected, and left to supervise the decoration team. The day passed at a breathtaking pace. Maya ran from one side to another, always invisible, always efficient. She saw the house transform into a luxury set. Exotic flowers, shining chandeliers, a table set with crystals and silverware, waiters rehearsing choreographies. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to impress. When night arrived and the first guests began to enter, Maya retreated to the service area as agreed. She stayed there, waiting, observing from afar the shine of the jewels, the sound of laughter, the clinking of glasses. At that moment, she didn't imagine that night would change her life forever. She didn't know that in a few hours, in front of dozens of witnesses, her dignity would be torn along with her uniform, and that from that tear, paradoxically, a chance for a new beginning would be born that she never dared to dream of. The story was about to truly begin. The reception started punctually at 8 o'clock. The first guests to arrive were received by Edward and Victoria at the main entrance, where a red carpet had been rolled out to the door. Victoria was radiant in a navy blue haute couture dress, discreet but very expensive jewelry, and her hair tied in an elegant bun. She smiled with calculated perfection, greeted each person with rehearsed intimacy, and presented the house as if it were an extension of her own personality. Edward, beside her, wore a custom-made Italian suit and appeared calm. But inside, he felt the weight of that night. He knew that the next minutes, the next hours, could define the future of years of work. The foreign investors would arrive soon. They were Singaporean, Swiss, and British, all representing multi-billion-dollar funds interested in expanding operations in the Americas. Edward needed to convince them that his company was solid, reliable, and capable of generating extraordinary returns. The main room was already full when the clock struck 9. Businessmen, politicians, lawyers, advertisers, people from the financial market, all circulating with glasses of French champagne in hand, talking about the market, elections, travel, and investments. The background music was smooth jazz. The lights, strategically positioned, created an atmosphere of discreet sophistication. Uniformed waiters circulated, offering elaborate hors d'oeuvres. Everything seemed like a perfect picture of success and elegance. Maya observed everything from afar, from the service area where she was positioned. She wore the standard uniform, grey pants and shirt, comfortable shoes, and hair tied back. She had a cleaning cloth in her hands and a small box with emergency products. Her role was clear: stay invisible until needed. If someone spilled something, if any bathroom needed attention, if any unforeseen event happened, she should resolve it without being seen. Around 9:30, one of the guests, visibly intoxicated, stumbled near the dessert table and knocked a glass of red wine onto the marble floor. The liquid spread quickly, forming a red stain that contrasted with the immaculate white of the floor. Some guests moved away. Others pretended not to see, but Victoria caught the incident immediately. Her eyes flashed. She turned her head, looking for someone from the cleaning team. Maya saw the signal. She grabbed the materials and approached quickly, keeping her head low. She knelt on the floor and began to clean the wine with quick, precise movements. She had been doing that for years. She knew exactly how to remove the stain without leaving a trace. She worked concentrated, trying to finish quickly to return to invisibility. It was at that moment that everything began to fall apart. Victoria approached, watching Maya work. Her look was hard, critical, loaded with impatience. Maya felt her presence but didn't dare raise her eyes. She continued scrubbing the floor, applying the product, drying it with another cloth. She was almost finished when Victoria spoke, loud enough for some nearby guests to hear. "You're taking too long. This is a party, not a funeral." Maya swallowed hard. She answered softly without looking up. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm finishing now." Victoria crossed her arms. Her tone of voice rose a bit more. "I pay you to be efficient, not to put on a show in the middle of my living room." Maya felt her blood boil, but she took a deep breath. She couldn't react. She needed the job. She finished the cleaning, gathered the cloths, and stood up, ready to move away. It was then that she noticed. While kneeling, without realizing it, she had lightly leaned her hand on one of the silk pillows of the Italian sofa next to her. The pillow now had a small damp mark, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Victoria saw it. And in that instant, something inside her snapped. You dirtied my pillow. You touched my sofa with your dirty hand. Victoria's voice now echoed through the room. Several guests stopped talking and looked at the scene. Maya felt the floor vanish from under her feet. She looked at the pillow, saw the light mark and tried to explain. It was an accident, ma'am. I can clean it now, quickly. It won't... An accident? You think that's an excuse? Do you know how much this sofa costs? How much this pillow costs? The entire hall had gone silent. Smooth jazz in the background, but no conversation. All eyes were fixed on the scene unfolding. Maya felt naked, exposed, small. Victoria continued, each word a blade. I should have fired you months ago. You are slow, sloppy, incompetent. Look what you did. Look at this mark. You destroyed an imported piece. Maya tried again, her voice trembling. Ma'am, I can pay for the cleaning, or I'll clean it myself. Please let me fix it. Victoria took a step forward. Her eyes shone with pure, distilled, almost pleasurable cruelty. She was enjoying it. She was enjoying having an audience. She was enjoying humiliating, destroying, and exercising absolute power over someone who couldn't fight back. You pay? With what money? You can barely pay your own bills. People like you have no sense of value, no sense of anything. You come here to my house, dirty my things, disrupt my party, and still want to make excuses. The words fell on Maya like physical blows. She squeezed the cloths in her hands, feeling her nails dig into her palms. She breathed with difficulty. She wanted to scream. She wanted to defend herself. She wanted to say she was much more than that woman saw. But the words didn't come out. She just stood there, still, trembling. It was then that Victoria took the final step. You know what disgusts me? It's having to look at you in this ridiculous uniform, pretending you're someone important. You are nothing. You're just another incompetent maid. I was an idiot to keep here out of pity. And before Maya could process what was happening, Victoria stepped forward, grabbed the collar of Maya's shirt and pulled with force. The fabric tore. The sound echoed in the silence of the room like a gunshot. The shirt opened in the front, exposing the old t-shirt Maya wore underneath. Victoria held the torn fabric for another second, as if admiring her own work of destruction, and then let go, leaving Maya there, holding the pieces of her own clothes, exposed, humiliated, destroyed in front of dozens of witnesses. Maya felt the world spin. Tears burned her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She wasn't going to give Victoria that satisfaction. She wasn't going to cry there in front of everyone. She gathered the pieces of the uniform against her chest, trying to cover herself, and walked quickly toward the exit of the room, crossing a corridor of petrified stairs. Some guests looked away, embarrassed. Others observed with a morbid curiosity, like someone watching an accident. There were even those who whispered justifications. She must have done something serious. Victoria was nervous about the party. Sometimes you have to be firm with employees. But no one said anything out loud. No one protested. No one defended Maya. Except one person. Edward had witnessed everything. He was in one of the adjacent rooms talking to two of the Swiss investors when he heard Victoria's voice rising in tone. He interrupted the conversation and walked to the door, from where he had a partial view of the main room. He saw his wife screaming at Maya. He saw the public humiliation, and he saw, with horror and incredulity, Victoria tear the employee's uniform in front of everyone. Something inside Edward broke at that moment. It wasn't immediate anger. It was a sense of late recognition, as if he finally saw clearly something that had always been there, but that he had refused to see. That wasn't the first time Victoria had humiliated someone. It wasn't the first time she used power to crush those who couldn't defend themselves, but it was the first time Edward allowed the scene to penetrate his consciousness, without escapes, without justifications, without the protection of complicit silence. He excused himself to the investors and walked to the main room. Victoria was still there, in the center, adjusting her dress, taking a deep breath, recomposing herself as if nothing had happened. The guests were starting to resume conversations, pretending normalcy. The jazz returned to fill the environment. Edward approached Victoria. He spoke low, but with a firmness she had never heard before. "What did you just do?" Victoria turned, surprised. She smiled, trying to look casual. "I solved a problem. That employee destroyed a silk pillow. She needed a lesson." Edward looked around. He saw the guests pretending not to hear. He saw the pillow with the almost imperceptible mark. He saw the wine stain on the floor, already cleaned. and he felt a deep shame, not of Victoria, but of himself. Shame for having allowed, for years, that kind of cruelty to happen under his own roof. "Where is she?" Victoria frowned. "Who? The cleaning lady? She must have left, or she's crying in some corner. It doesn't matter." Edward turned his back on his wife without answering. He walked through the hallways of the house, searching. He passed through the kitchen, the laundry, the pantry. Finally, he found Maya in the back garden, sitting on a stone bench, hugging herself, trying to hold the pieces of the torn uniform. When she heard footsteps, Maya raised her face. She saw Edward approaching and immediately stood up, trying to compose some dignity. She was ready to hear that she was fired, that she needed to leave, that she should never return. But what Edward said surprised her completely. "I'm sorry." Maya blinked, confused. She didn't know what to answer. Edward continued, his voice heavy with an emotion she never imagined seeing in that man. "I'm sorry for everything. For what happened in there, for what my wife did. And I'm sorry for having allowed things like this to happen in this house without ever doing anything to stop it." Maya felt the tears finally escape. Not just from sadness, but from something bigger, more complex. It was relief, it was validation. It was the first time in that whole horrible night that someone saw her as a person. Edward took off his own suit jacket and held it out to her. "Take it. Cover yourself with this." Maya hesitated but took it. She put the jacket over the torn uniform. The fabric was still warm, smelling of expensive cologne. She felt strange, out of place, but at the same time, protected. "You're not going to be fired," Edward continued. "And what happened there won't stay like this. I'm going to resolve this." Maya didn't know if she believed it. She didn't know if that was real or if she was dreaming, if it was pity or something more. But at that moment, sitting in the dark garden, wearing a millionaire's jacket after being publicly destroyed, Maya allowed herself, for the first time in a long time, to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Inside the house, the party continued. Victoria laughed, toasted, and charmed the investors. But something had broken that night, and none of those present would ever forget the image of a woman having her uniform torn in the middle of a room full of powerful people who chose to do nothing, except one man, who finally decided to act. Edward went back inside the house with firm steps, but a racing heart. He had never confronted Victoria publicly. He had never questioned her actions in front of others. During 18 years of marriage, they had built a routine of silences, tacit agreements, and muffled conflicts. He avoided confrontations because they required energy, positioning, and breaking with the comfort zone. But that night, something had changed. Seeing Maya destroyed that way, seeing the cruelty distilled in every word from Victoria, seeing the omission of everyone present, had lit a revolt inside him that no longer fit in his chest. He found Victoria in the dining room, surrounded by a group of businessmen's wives, all sipping champagne and talking about trips to Europe. She laughed, gestured, and seemed completely at ease, as if the previous minutes hadn't happened. Edward approached and interrupted the conversation without asking permission. "Victoria, I need to talk to you. Now." She turned her face, surprised by the tone. She smiled at her friends like someone apologizing for a momentary inconvenience. "I'm busy, honey. Can it wait?" "It can't," Edward replied, his voice low but loaded with a firmness that made Victoria frown. She realized something was wrong. She excused herself to her friends, who exchanged curious looks, and accompanied Edward to the office on the second floor. As soon as the door closed, Victoria crossed her arms, assuming a defensive posture. "What's wrong? Why are you embarrassing me in front of my friends?" Edward took a deep breath. He tried to stay calm, but the words came out hard. "What you did to Maya was unacceptable." Victoria arched her eyebrows, genuinely surprised. "The cleaning lady? Are you serious that you called me here because of that?" Edward took a step forward. "She has a name, Maya. And yes, I'm serious. You tore her uniform in front of dozens of people. You humiliated her in a way I've never seen you do to anyone." Victoria let out a short, ironic laugh. "You're exaggerating. She dirtied my silk pillow, a very expensive piece. I just made it clear that this kind of sloppiness is not tolerated here." Edward felt the anger grow. "Sloppiness?" "She was cleaning wine that one of your drunk guests spilled. She was working. And you destroyed her over a mark that's barely visible." Victoria shrugged, as if the conversation were a waste of time. "Edward, You don't understand how a house works. Employees need limits. If you don't impose respect, they do whatever they want. I've managed this house for years and never had problems. You never had problems because no one has the courage to question you, Victoria. People leave silently because they need the job. But that doesn't mean you're right. Victoria narrowed her eyes. Her voice came out icy. Since when do you care about employees? You barely look at them. You spend the whole day locked in the office or traveling. Suddenly you've become a defender of the oppressed. Edward felt the blow. She was right. He had been a complicit by omission for years, but now, for the first time, he saw clearly how wrong that was. You're right, he said, his voice lower. I never cared, I never wanted to see. But today I saw, and I can't pretend I didn't see. What you did was cruel, Victoria. It was inhuman. Victoria took a step toward him, her face contracted in contained fury. Inhuman? You want to talk about inhuman? I'm the one who keeps this house running, who organizes your parties, who takes care of your image, who makes you look successful for these investors you want to impress so much. And you come to lecture me because of a maid. Edward shook his head, tired. That doesn't justify anything. You don't have the right to humiliate anyone, no matter who they are. Victoria crossed her arms again, now clearly irritated. Oh, I see. You're having a crisis of conscience. How beautiful. But you know what I think? I think you're looking for an excuse to attack me, because you're unhappy. Because you realize the marriage turned into a farce. But instead of having the courage to talk about us, you prefer to use an employee as a shield. The words hit Edward full force. There was truth there. The marriage really was a farce. But that didn't change what Victoria had done. Maybe you're right about the marriage, but that has nothing to do with what happened downstairs. You crossed a line, Victoria, and I won't pretend I didn't see it. She let out another laugh, this time louder, almost hysterical. And what are you going to do, Edward? Give me a scolding? Punish me? You don't even have the courage to ask for a divorce. Imagine doing anything that actually matters. Edward looked at his wife. For the first time in years, he truly saw her. Not the elegant woman who charmed guests, not the impeccable wife who managed the house, but the real person behind the mask, someone deeply unhappy who used cruelty to feel some control over her own life. I feel sorry for you, Victoria, truly, but this needs to stop. She turned her back, walking toward the door. Do whatever you want, Edward, but this conversation is over. I have guests waiting. And she left, slamming the door. Edward stood there, alone in the office, feeling the weight of that conversation. He knew that something had broken definitively between him and Victoria. There was no going back. But at the same time, he felt relieved. For the first time in a long time, he had taken a stand. He had said what he thought. He had chosen a side. He went down the stairs and returned to the party. The guests were still there, but the atmosphere had changed. The conversations were lower, more tense. Everyone had witnessed the scene. Everyone knew what had happened. And now they observed Edward with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. One of the British investors approached, polite but clearly embarrassed. Mr. Sterling, we hope everything is all right. Edward forced a smile. It is, just resolving an internal situation. I apologize for the inconvenience. The man nodded and moved away. Edward realized the night was lost. The investors wanted to leave. The atmosphere was heavy. The party that was supposed to impress had turned into a disaster. Victoria returned to the room a few minutes later, recomposed, smiling, trying to save the situation. She circulated among the guests, joked, deflected, and did her best to normalize the environment. But everyone felt the tension. One by one, people began to say goodbye, claiming appointments the next day, tiredness or traffic. In less than an hour, the house was empty. When the last guest left, Victoria turned to Edward, her face red with anger. Congratulations, you destroyed months of planning. The investors left embarrassed, all because of a maid. Edward didn't answer. He just went up to the bedroom, locked the door, and lay down dressed on the bed. He couldn't sleep. He stayed looking at the ceiling, thinking about Maya, about Victoria, about everything that had happened that night. Meanwhile, in the apartment in Queens, Maya arrived home exhausted, physically and emotionally. Her mother was still awake, sewing in the living room. Seeing her daughter enter, she dropped her work and ran to hug her. What happened, honey? Are you okay? Maya collapsed in her mother's hug. She cried for the first time since she left that house on the Upper East Side. She cried for the humiliation, for the pain, for the feeling of having been reduced to nothing in front of so many people. But she also cried from relief, because someone had apologized, someone had seen what they had done to her. And that, in some strange way, made a difference. She told her mother everything, the wine, the pillow, the screams, the torn uniform, and she also told her about Edward, about the jacket, about the apology in the garden. The mother listened to everything in silence, holding her daughter's hands. When Maya finished, she spoke with a firm voice. "You are not going back to that house, Maya. It doesn't matter how much we need the money. Your dignity is worth more." Maya shook her head, tired. "I know, Mom, I know." But deep down, she didn't know what to do. She needed the job. She needed the money. But she didn't know if she could go back, look at that room, relive that moment. She lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, just as Edward, miles away, also looked at his own ceiling. Two people in completely different worlds, united by the same traumatic night, thinking about the same scene, trying to understand what had happened and what would come next. The next day, Saturday, Maya woke up with the feeling that everything had been a nightmare. But looking at Edward's jacket hanging on the chair, she knew it was real. She picked up her phone and saw 3 missed calls, all from the Sterling house number. Her heart raced. Was it Victoria calling to fire her officially? Or was it Edward? She was about to return the call when the phone rang again. It was the same number. She answered with a trembling voice. "Hello? Maya?" It was Edward's voice. "Please don't hang up. I need to talk to you." Maya held the phone tightly. "I'm listening. I know yesterday was terrible, and I know you probably never want to see this house again, but I would like to talk to you in person. No pressure, no demands, just talk." Maya closed her eyes. She didn't know if it was a good idea. She didn't know if she could do it. "About what?" Edward hesitated on the other side of the line. "About everything. About what happened, about what I can do to fix it, and about you. About who you are beyond the work you do here." Maya felt something strange in her chest. It wasn't just fear or distrust. It was also curiosity. For the first time, someone from that world wanted to hear her. "Truly, I'll think about it," she replied. Edward sighed, relieved. "Thank you, Maya. That's all I ask. Think about it, and if you decide to talk, I'll be here." They hung up. Maya stayed looking at the phone, trying to process what had just happened. The world had turned upside down, and she had no idea how to fix it, or if she wanted to fix it. All she knew was that something had changed, and that there was no going back. Maya took 2 days to make the decision. She spent the entire weekend thinking, talking to her mother, weighing pros and cons. Part of her wanted to simply disappear, forget that house on the Upper East Side existed, erase the humiliation she suffered from her memory. But another part, small but insistent, felt curious. Edward had apologized. He had taken a stand against his own wife. He had called the next day wanting to talk. That wasn't common. It wasn't the behavior Maya expected from someone from that world. On Monday morning, she picked up her phone and typed a short message. "I agree to talk, but I don't want to go to the house. Can we meet in a public place?" The answer came in less than 5 minutes. "Of course, wherever you prefer. You choose." Maya thought for a few seconds. She suggested a coffee shop downtown near Grand Central Terminal. It was neutral territory, far from the Upper East Side, far from Queens, a place where neither of them had an advantage or disadvantage. They agreed on Tuesday at 10 in the morning. Maya spent Monday trying to prepare herself mentally. She didn't know what to expect. She didn't know what Edward really wanted. She tried to anticipate questions, rehearse answers, and build defenses. But deep down, she knew there was no way to truly prepare. She would have to go and find out. On Tuesday, she woke up early, took a long shower, and dressed in the most presentable clothes she had: dark jeans, a simple white shirt, and clean sneakers. She looked at herself in the mirror and almost laughed at her own attempt to look confident. She was nervous. Her hands were shaking. Her stomach was turning. Her mother hugged her before she left. "Go calmly, daughter. You don't owe anyone anything. Remember that. Your dignity is intact." Maya nodded, thanked her, and left. She arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes before the agreed time. She chose a table in the corner with her back to the wall from where she could see the entrance. She ordered a coffee and waited, stirring the cup, trying to control her nervousness. Edward entered punctually at 10. He was different. He wore jeans, a dress shirt without a tie, and casual shoes. None of the impeccable suit, the ostentatious watch, or the executive pose. He just seemed like an ordinary man, tired trying to deal with something bigger than him. He saw Maya in the corner and walked to the table. She stood up out of reflex, not knowing if she should greet him formally or not. Edward resolved the impasse by extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." Maya shook his hand quickly and sat down again. Edward ordered a coffee for himself and stayed in silence for a few seconds, as if searching for the right words. "I don't know where to start," he said finally. "I rehearsed this 1,000 times in my head, but now that I'm here, everything seems insufficient." Maya didn't say anything, she just waited. Edward took a deep breath. "I wanted to ask for your forgiveness again, not just for what Victoria did, but for everything that happened before. For all the days you worked in that house being treated as invisible. For all the times I saw my wife humiliate someone and did nothing. For being complicit by omission." Maya looked at him, trying to understand if that was sincere or just passing guilt. Edward continued, "I grew up in a world where I never had to think about any of this. I always had everything. I was always served. I never stopped to think about who was on the other side, doing the work, sustaining the comfort. And that's not an excuse, it's just context, because I know ignorance doesn't justify cruelty." Maya finally spoke, her voice low but firm. "Why are you doing this? Why are you here?" Edward looked at the coffee cup in front of him. "Because what happened that night woke me up to something I had been ignoring for years. I realized I was living a meaningless life. Surrounded by luxury but empty, married but alone, successful but unhappy. And when I saw you there in the garden, holding the pieces of your uniform but still standing, still firm, I realized you had something I never had. Real dignity. Not that fake dignity you buy with money and a surname, but the dignity that comes from within, from knowing who you are even when they try to destroy you." Maya felt her eyes burn. She didn't expect to hear that. She didn't expect to be seen that way. "I'm not a hero," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm just a tired woman who does what she can to survive." "And that's exactly why you are stronger than I will ever be," Edward replied. "Because you survive. You don't give up, even when everything is against you." Maya looked away. She didn't know how to handle that conversation. It was strange, intense, and too vulnerable. "What do you want from me?" she asked directly. Edward thought before answering. "I want to know you, truly. I want to know who Maya is besides the cleaning lady who works in my house. I want to know what you like, what you dream of, what you think about life. And I want, if you allow me, to try to fix in some way what was broken." Maya shook her head, disbelieving. "You can't fix this. What was done, was done." "I know. But I can try to do things differently from now on, and I can start by listening to you." Maya looked at him for a long moment. She saw sincerity in his eyes. She saw tiredness. She saw someone who was also trying to find some meaning in the middle of chaos. And then, for the first time in years, Maya began to speak. She told him about her childhood in the outer boroughs, about her father who worked in construction until he got sick, about her seamstress mother who never complained, about the 3 younger siblings she helped raise. She told him about dropping out of school at 15, about her dream of being a teacher that she had to shelve, about the books she read secretly during her lunch break, about the online courses she took at dawn when everyone was sleeping. Edward listened in silence, every word a revelation, every story a slap in the face to everything he thought he knew about the world. When Maya finished, she was exhausted. She had spoken for almost an hour without stopping. She had opened wounds she had kept closed for years, and strangely, she felt lighter. Edward stayed in silence for a while. Then he said with a choked voice, "You should be teaching, you should be in college. You should have all the opportunities I had and wasted." Maya smiled sadly. "Life doesn't work that way, not for people like me." "But it could work," Edward insisted, "if someone gave you a chance." Maya looked at him, suspicious. "What are you suggesting?" Edward hesitated. He himself didn't know exactly what he was suggesting, but he felt he needed to do something real, concrete. "Let me think about how I can help, not as a favor, not as charity, but as recognition, because you deserve it." Maya didn't answer. She didn't know if she believed it, but for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that things could change. While Edward and Maya talked in the coffee shop, Victoria was in action. She had spent the weekend ruminating on anger and planning revenge. The public humiliation she suffered when Edward confronted her in front of the guests would not be forgotten. And the guilt in her head belonged to Maya. That insignificant cleaning lady had turned her husband's head, caused a scandal, and destroyed the most important party of the year. Victoria started making calls. Close friends, acquaintances from the club, women from high society who loved a good gossip. Each conversation was carefully orchestrated. "Did you see what happened at my party?" she would say, faking embarrassment. "It was terrible. That employee I have, the cleaning lady, was completely out of control. I think she had been drinking something. She caused a scandal, and the worst part is that Edward, poor thing, felt sorry for her. You know how he is, always too nice." The stories spread, transformed, and gained new details with each repetition. In a few days, the version circulating in the elite circles was completely different from reality. Maya went from victim to villain, from a humiliated woman to a manipulative opportunist, from an honest worker to a gold digger trying to take advantage of Edward's kindness. Victoria also took other measures. She called employment agencies that provided staff for households and spread the word that Maya was problematic, disrespectful, and not recommended for hiring. She made sure that if Maya tried to get another job, she would find closed doors, but the most calculated blow was yet to come. Victoria knew Edward was changed, distant, and questioning. She needed to regain control, and the best way to do that was to completely destroy any possibility of Maya representing a threat. She began to spread heavier insinuations. She suggested in strategic conversations that there was something suspicious about the way Edward was defending the cleaning lady. She left it in the air, without saying it explicitly, that maybe there was something more between the two. She planted seeds of doubt, jealousy, and speculation. Maya obviously didn't know any of this. She was starting to rebuild some self-confidence after the conversation with Edward. She was considering accepting help, thinking about going back to school, and dreaming again. But Victoria was just beginning her campaign of destruction, and when the consequences began to appear, Maya would discover that being seen finally also meant becoming a target, and that facing the hatred of a powerful woman determined to crush any threat to her control was something no conversation in a coffee shop could prepare her for. The war was just beginning, and Maya, without knowing it, was right in the center of it. The first time Maya felt the weight of Victoria's campaign was 3 days after the meeting at the coffee shop. She had sent her resume to 5 households that were hiring housekeepers, all advertised in WhatsApp groups dedicated to domestic jobs. She had old references, proven experience, and had always been punctual and dedicated. It shouldn't be hard to get at least one interview, but all the answers were the same. "The position has already been filled. Thank you for your interest." Maya found it strange. Usually the houses scheduled at least one conversation before deciding. She tried a few more spots. Same answer. It was then that an acquaintance, also a cleaner, called her with information that chilled her blood. "Maya, I don't know if you know, but there's a woman calling the agencies and the houses, speaking ill of you, saying you're problematic, that you steal, that you cause trouble. A friend of mine works in an agency and told me. I thought you needed to know." Maya sat on the bed, her phone shaking in her hand. Victoria, it could only be her. The revenge hadn't ended at the party. It was just beginning. She tried to stay calm. She looked for more jobs, this time in different neighborhoods far from the Upper East Side, but the news had already spread. The New York elite circle was small, and gossip traveled fast. Maya was being marked as unemployable, and without a job she had no way to pay the bills that were piling up. Her mother noticed her daughter's growing despair and tried to help. She got some extra sewing jobs, but it wasn't enough. The rent was late. The blood pressure medicine was running out. Maya felt the weight of responsibility crushing her shoulders. That was when Edward called again. "Maya, I have a proposal for you, but I want you to listen to the end before you say no." Maya listened, suspicious. Edward explained that he had talked to a friend who managed a network of private schools. They needed an administrative assistant in one of the units. The work was simple: organizing documents, answering phones, helping with enrollments. It didn't require formal experience, just organization and good communication, and it paid better than cleaning jobs. "I recommended you," said Edward. "I talked about your story, about your desire to study. He agreed to give you a chance. The interview is tomorrow if you want to go." Maya stayed in silence. Part of her wanted to scream with relief. Another part felt distrust. Was it true? Was Edward trying to help or just ease his own guilt? "Why are you doing this?" she asked for the second time. "Because I can, and because you deserve it." Maya accepted. She didn't have many options. The next day she went to the interview. The school director, a man in his 50s named Mr. Henderson, received her with sympathy. They talked for half an hour. He asked questions about organization, about how she would handle dissatisfied parents, and about tight deadlines. Maya answered with honesty. She talked about her routine of years doing cleaning, about learning to manage time, and about dealing with difficult people. Mr. Henderson seemed impressed. "Edward spoke very highly of you. He said you are one of the most hard-working and intelligent people he knows. And from our conversation, I see he was right. The job is yours if you want it." Maya felt her eyes burn. She accepted on the spot. She would start the following week. The salary was almost double what she earned doing cleaning. She would have a contract, benefits, and a fixed schedule. For the first time in years, she felt she was moving up, not just surviving. She left the school and called Edward. She thanked him with a choked voice. Edward just said he was happy for her, and that if she needed anything, she just had to call. Maya hung up and cried right there on the street in the middle of the afternoon. She cried from relief, from gratitude, and from hope, but also from fear. Because she knew Victoria wasn't going to like that at all, and she was right. When Victoria discovered, through a friend whose daughter studied in the same school network, that Maya had gotten a better job with Edward's help, she exploded. She confronted her husband that same night, screaming, "You got a job for her? For the cleaning lady? Are you completely crazy?" Edward was sitting on the sofa in the living room reading reports. He looked at his wife with a calm that irritated her even more. "I did. She needs to work, and you made sure to destroy her chances of getting anything in the cleaning market. I thought it was fair to help." Victoria took a step forward, her face red with anger. "Fair? You think it's fair to help a servant who caused the biggest scandal of my life? Who turned my husband against me? Who is trying to destroy our marriage?" Edward closed the papers and looked at Victoria with a coldness she had never seen before. "The one destroying our marriage is you, Victoria. You with your cruelty. You with your obsession with control. You who cannot see human beings when you look at the people who work for you." Victoria felt something strange in her chest. Fear, perhaps. For the first time, she saw that Edward was truly changed. It wasn't just a passing anger. It was a real transformation. "You're in love with her," she accused, her voice trembling. "That's it. You fell in love with the cleaning lady." Edward shook his head, tired. "No, Victoria, I'm not in love with her. But I am in admiration. I am impressed. I am learning from her what real dignity is. And I am realizing that I spent 18 years married to a woman I don't respect. And worse, who doesn't respect me." The words fell like bombs. Victoria stepped back, pale. "Are you asking for a divorce?" Edward sighed. "I don't know yet, but I know I can't live like this anymore. Pretending everything is okay. Pretending we're happy. Pretending our marriage is anything other than a convenient partnership." Victoria left the room without answering. She locked herself in the bedroom and cried for the first time in years. Not out of sadness for the marriage, but out of anger for losing control. Anger that Edward had found something or someone that made him question everything. And anger because deep down she knew he was right. Meanwhile, the story of Maya's public humiliation began to leak beyond the elite circles. One of the guests at the party, bothered by what she had witnessed, mentioned the incident to a journalist friend. The journalist, always attentive to stories of abuse of power, began to investigate. She discovered Maya's name through contacts. She got her phone number and called, introducing herself and asking if she would agree to tell her version of the facts. Maya hesitated. She didn't want exposure, she didn't want to become news, but the journalist was convincing. "This story isn't just about you. It's about thousands of domestic workers who suffer humiliations every day and have no voice. You have the chance to change that." Maya thought of her mother, her cleaning lady friends, and all the women she knew who had gone through similar situations. She agreed to give the interview. The article was published on a wide-reaching news website a week later. The title was direct. Housekeeper has uniform torn at Millionaire's party. The abuse the elite hides. The text told the full story. The party, the pillow, the screams, the torn uniform. It included Maya's testimony, who spoke courageously about what she felt at that moment. And it also included anonymous testimonies from other employees who had worked for Victoria and suffered similar abuses. The repercussion was immediate and explosive. On social media, the story went viral. Thousands of people shared, commented, and were outraged. Many domestic workers began to tell their own stories of humiliation. The case became a symbol of a larger struggle, the struggle for respect, dignity, and labor rights. Victoria woke up one day and found herself at the center of a national scandal. Her name was everywhere. Newspapers, websites, social media. Some acquaintances called to offer solidarity, but most pulled away, afraid of association. Charity events she used to organize were cancelled. Boards of cultural institutions asked for her resignation. The social life she had built for years collapsed in a matter of days. She tried to give her version of the story. She said everything was exaggerated, that the media distorted the facts and that Maya was taking advantage of the situation to gain fame. But no one believed her. There were too many witnesses, and the narrative was too clear. Edward, on the other hand, gained unexpected respect. Information circulated that he had confronted his wife publicly, apologized to Maya, and helped her get a new job. Businessmen began to praise him discreetly for the courage to take a stand. The international investors who had left the party embarrassed resumed conversations, impressed by the integrity demonstrated. Maya, in the middle of all this, was just trying to live. She started her job at the school and discovered she was good at it. The parents liked her, the students treated her with respect, and her co-workers received her well. For the first time, she felt she was building something beyond survival. But the exposure also brought problems. She received messages of support, but also of hatred. People accused her of being an opportunist, a family destroyer, and a liar. Victoria, even publicly defeated, still had allies willing to attack. Edward called frequently to see how she was doing. The conversations got longer, more personal. He told her about the fights with Victoria, about the decision to separate, about the fear of starting over at 45. Maya listened, advised, and shared her own insecurities, and gradually, without realizing it, the two began to build something that went beyond gratitude or admiration. A real, deep connection began to emerge, based on mutual respect and an understanding that neither of them had found before. But the path was still full of obstacles. Victoria hadn't completely given up, and the society surrounding them still looked with suspicion at the growing friendship between a millionaire and a former cleaning lady. The story was far from over, but for the first time, Maya felt she was no longer alone in the fight, and that made all the difference. 3 months after the article went viral, Maya was sitting in a crowded auditorium in downtown Manhattan. She had been invited to speak at an event about labor rights, organized by unions and social movements. She never imagined she would be there, on stage, with a microphone in hand, about to tell her story to hundreds of people. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. But when she looked at the audience and saw so many faces that reflected her own journey, domestic workers, cleaners, cooks, women who knew firsthand the weight of invisibility and humiliation, Maya felt a strength she didn't know she had. She started speaking low, almost whispering into the microphone. She told them about that night, about the spilled wine, about the screams, about the torn uniform. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. She spoke about the shame she felt, about the feeling of being reduced to nothing in front of so many people. But she also spoke about what came after, about the apology she didn't expect, about the help she received, about the courage she found not to give up. "I learned that our dignity is not in the uniform we wear," said Maya, her voice now firm. "It's not in the work we do. It's not in the money we earn. Our dignity is in here. And no one, no matter how powerful, can tear that away from us. They can tear our uniform, but they cannot tear our soul." The auditorium exploded in applause. Women cried, hugging one another. Maya felt her own eyes burn. For the first time since everything happened, she didn't feel shame. She felt pride. Edward was in the audience, discreet, in the corner. He had asked to go, but Maya initially hesitated. She didn't want people to think she was there because of him, that it was just another story of a poor woman saved by a rich man. But Edward insisted he only wanted to support her, from afar, without the spotlight. When he saw Maya on stage, speaking with that strength, that presence, Edward felt something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't passion, it wasn't desire. It was pure admiration. It was the certainty that he was in the presence of someone extraordinary, someone life had tried to break but who had refused to yield. After the event, Maya was surrounded by journalists, activists, and other workers wanting to talk. Edward waited. When they finally managed to meet, it was already night. "You were incredible," he said. Maya smiled, tired but happy. "I was dying of fear." "It didn't show. You looked like a leader." They walked together to a nearby restaurant. They sat at a quiet table and talked for hours. Edward told her that he had finally filed for divorce. Victoria resisted at first, demanded absurd settlements, and tried to use Edward's public image as a bargaining chip. But gradually, she realized she no longer had power. The lawyers were negotiating the final terms. "How are you feeling?" asked Maya. Edward thought before answering. "Relieved, scared, free. All at the same time. I spent 18 years trapped in a marriage that was never real. And now, for the first time, I have the chance to discover who I am without that mask." Maya understood. She was also discovering who she was. The woman who spoke on the stage that night wasn't the same one who cleaned the floor with her head low months ago. Something had transformed, not just in external circumstances, but inside her. "Edward, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Why did you do all this? Truly, why did you risk so much for me?" Edward looked into her eyes. "Because seeing you in that garden, holding the pieces of your uniform but still standing, showed me what I had become. A hollow man living a life without purpose, surrounded by luxury but dead inside. You woke me up, Maya. Not by being special, but by being real, by being true, and by making me realize that I had spent 45 years without ever being true to myself." Maya felt something tighten in her chest. She couldn't define what it was. Gratitude, perhaps, or something deeper. "I didn't save you, Maya," continued Edward. "You saved yourself. I just had the privilege of witnessing it." They stayed in silence for a moment, just looking at each other. There was something unsaid hovering in the air, a possibility, a connection that went beyond everything that had happened. But Maya knew it wasn't time. She was still rebuilding herself. She was still learning to believe in herself. And Edward was also in transition, leaving a failed marriage, rethinking his entire life. "Maybe one day," thought Maya, "but not now. Now I need to walk alone, prove to myself that I am capable." In the following weeks, both of their lives continued to change. Edward sold the house on the Upper East Side. He could no longer look at that place without remembering everything that had happened there. He bought a smaller, simpler apartment in a less ostentatious neighborhood. He began to get involved in social projects, using his business knowledge to help small entrepreneurs from underserved communities. Maya was promoted at the school. The director, impressed with her dedication and capacity, offered her the position of coordinating the administrative sector. She accepted, and at night, she began taking GED classes to finish her high school equivalent. She dreamed of going to college for education. She wanted to be a teacher. Finally, Victoria, on the other hand, disappeared from the spotlight. After the divorce was finalized, she moved to a town upstate. Some said she had gone to live with her sister, others that she had isolated herself completely. No one knew for sure, and few cared. But Maya, even after everything, felt something strange when she thought of Victoria. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't justification, it was just an understanding that hurting people hurt other people, that behind that cruelty was someone deeply unhappy, trying to fill a void that luxury and power could never fill. 6 months after the event in the auditorium, Maya received an unexpected invitation. A non-governmental organization that fought for the rights of domestic workers wanted her to become their official spokesperson. They would travel across the country, speak at events, give interviews, and work to pass stricter laws against abuse. Maya hesitated. It was a lot of responsibility, a lot of exposure. But when she talked to her mother, she heard the words she needed. "Daughter, you spent your whole life being invisible. Now you have the chance to be seen, not out of pity, not because of a scandal, but for who you truly are. Don't waste that." Maya accepted. On her first trip as spokesperson, she went to Washington, D.C. to participate in a public hearing in Congress. She was nervous, but firm. She spoke to representatives, senators, and aides. She told her story. She spoke on behalf of millions of silenced workers. And at the end of the hearing, when she left the chamber, she saw Edward waiting in the hallway. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised. He smiled. "I came to support you." As always, Maya felt her eyes burn. She hugged Edward right there, in the hallway of Congress. And in that hug, she understood something important. It didn't matter what the future brought. It didn't matter if one day they were just friends or something more. What mattered was that they had transformed each other. Edward had found purpose. Maya had found a voice. And both had found the courage to be who they really were. Months turned into a year. Maya was now enrolled in college for an education degree, worked at the NGO, and still kept her job at the school. She lived rushing, tired but fulfilled. Edward had completely restructured his company, implementing social responsibility policies, hiring people from poor communities, and investing in education. And gradually, in the middle of conversations, calls, and casual meetings, something began to bloom. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't explosive. It was soft, natural, like water finding its way between stones. One night, after a simple dinner at a downtown restaurant, Edward looked at Maya and said the words he had been holding for months. "I've fallen in love with you." Maya wasn't surprised. She knew. She felt it. But hearing it was different. "Me too," she replied, simple as that. They didn't kiss there. They didn't make grand promises. They just held hands and walked down the street, two survivors of a night that could have destroyed both, but instead had rebuilt them. The story of Maya and Edward spread far beyond the night a uniform was torn. It became a documentary. It became a theme for debates. It inspired changes in labor laws. But for them, the most important thing wasn't the public impact. It was the personal impact. Maya had stopped being invisible. Not because someone saved her, but because she herself chose to stand up, speak, and exist. Edward had stopped being just a hollow businessman. He had found something bigger than money or success. He had found humanity. And together they proved that the greatest transformations are not born from violent revolutions, but from small acts of courage, from someone who refuses to accept humiliation, from someone who chooses to apologize when it would be easier to ignore, from someone who raises their voice when everyone expects silence. Life didn't turn into a fairy tale. It continued to be hard, full of challenges. But now they faced them together, and that made all the difference. 2 years after the fateful night, Maya graduated with her degree in education. Her mother was in the audience, crying with pride. Edward was also there, applauding. And when Maya went up on stage to receive her diploma, she looked at the audience and saw her entire journey reflected in those people. From an invisible cleaning lady to a college graduate, from a silenced woman to the voice of thousands. The uniform torn that night of luxury had tried to destroy her. But in the end, it was exactly that moment of pain that opened the way for the greatest transformation of her life, and for the transformation of everyone who witnessed it and learned that dignity is not torn. Dignity is carried within, and when someone tries to destroy it, the choice to stand up and move forward is the greatest act of courage there is. Maya looked at the diploma in her hands and smiled. The journey was just beginning, but now, finally, she was the master of her own story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Maya and Edward has touched your heart. If you are moved by this journey of dignity, transformation, and courage, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Every day we bring intense stories